We have lots to discuss here in today's video, including the latest rumors on a variety of situations around the league, including Kaprizov and the Minnesota Wild, Mason McTabish and the Anaheim Ducks. We have the latest on Jason Robertson and the Dallas Stars, the latest on the Montreal Canadiens, number 2 center update, plus we have an update as well on longtime veteran Evgeny Malkin. Could he leave Pittsburgh, or will he finish out his career as a Penguin? Plus, we have the latest update as well regarding potential return to the NHL for Alex Formenton and some other news around the league, including a scary situation this summer with Rasmus Dahlin and his fiance. All that and more coming up next. So welcome back to another video here at Top Shelf Hockey. As I mentioned, we have lots to discuss in today's video. I want to kick things off with some information we learned today about Rasmus Dahlin of the Buffalo Sabres and his fiance. They have been going through a very scary medical situation since the middle of the summer here, and this is something that most people, I guess, didn't really hear about, but they're certainly making sure they want to talk about it now to kind of create awareness and kind of, just to kind of make sure that it's something maybe other people can draw on or learn from to hopefully, detection and early signs of medical issues. But Dahlin and his fiance, Carolina, were on vacation in France, and she was not feeling very well. Well, it turns out she ended up going into the early stages of heart failure. Needed a lot of CPR to keep her alive. Ended up later needing a heart transplant. It was a pretty darn serious situation. She's still recovering as of right now over in Sweden. Of course, Dahlin made his way back to Buffalo for training camp here, but wow, imagine being on vacation, you're far from home, even if you are at home, and then all of a sudden this situation pops up, for somebody who appears to be quite young and healthy, especially, not something that you would expect to run into. But yeah, a very, very scary situation. You would not think, a young woman like her would be running into heart failure, and then needing and receiving a heart transplant at such a young age. But pretty scary situation. Thankfully, that sounds like, she's on the mend, and certainly is expected, I think, to, make a good recovery here. But just a very scary situation that you wouldn't think or hear of. But clearly, like I said, they wanted to speak out about it and kind of just let everybody know what was going on with the situation, kind of maybe raise a little bit of awareness about dealing with certain health situations and whatnot. But certainly want to wish her all the best in recovery here, and certainly I'm sure Rasmus Dahlin is going to have a lot on his mind as training camp gets underway. It's quite the ordeal, and I hope that wishing him the best getting through the rest of the way here with the recovery. But that was a major situation that almost had a very, very bad outcome, but ended up having a more positive outcome, thankfully. We also learned today the longtime NHL executive and general manager Ray Shero, unfortunately he had passed away a while back, but he is being honored posthumously as the 2025 Lester Patrick Trophy recipient for outstanding service to hockey in the United States. So we know Shero had a long, successful career in hockey. Obviously, it ran into some health issues and died at a fairly young age. So nice to see him being honored for all the hard work he put in over the years. Now, as I mentioned, a variety of news and a lot of rumors around the NHL. We're going to take a look at all the latest updates here. Start with Pittsburgh and Evgeny Malkin. Of course, we know the rumors around this player. We've heard that the Penguins are not going to be offering him a new contract. I mean, I know the Penguins won't confirm that 100%, but I know in The Athletic, their beat writer Josh Shea did confirm that it's very unlikely that that's going to happen. Of course, the Penguins are trying to get younger and, trying to move in a new direction here. At the same time, they're not going to force their legendary veterans like Malkin and Crosby and Letang out. They'll obviously let them play out their contracts. If they want to be traded, they'll talk about that with them. Could made comments saying, he's got basically 20 years in, that he's had a long, successful career with the Penguins, 3 Stanley Cups. So, he's quite proud of that, but at the same time, hasn't been happy with his last couple of seasons. He says he's still hungry to show what he's got out there. He was asked about, what the future could hold, essentially saying if the Penguins are having a good season and they're competitive, that he's going to want to see it through and finish everything out with the team. But clearly, if it's another down year, that, he says in a way that, hearing scenarios like you saw last year, for example, with Brad Marchand in Florida, moving on to another Stanley Cup was, intriguing, but at the same time would be weird, especially if you moved on and it didn't work out. So he seems intrigued by the idea of maybe waiving that no trade clause. Like he said, he would have to consider it. I mean, it wasn't an absolute no. We had heard before that Malkin might be open to a trade to finish out the season with another team. Obviously, for some of these players, it's really important to them to have, a one-team legacy. It sounds like something that might be important to Crosby, but at the same time, like Malkin, the losing does become a little bit challenging from a mental standpoint. And, when the opportunity presents itself to maybe go to another team and have a shot at a more competitive situation and another Stanley Cup before you retire, it certainly sounds intriguing. He also referenced the possibility of playing in Russia for a season before he's all done as well. So, again, we'll have to monitor this situation with Evgeny Malkin. It sure sounds like Malkin is at least open to the idea and intrigued by it. Like you said, he also thinks it might be weird if it happened too, right? But we'll definitely be monitoring that situation closely. We had heard lots about Sidney Crosby. It sounds like, from Dubas' standpoint, if Crosby wants to be traded, then they'll do their best to accommodate and to get him what he wants. But they're, obviously content to let Crosby's contract run its course to be the leader and captain of the Penguins. But certainly they want to go in a new direction to get younger, faster, more skilled, and try to move this team in another direction into the next era of Penguin hockey. So definitely fair to say there's going to be some painful times in Pittsburgh for a while as they hopefully, over time get this thing turned around. A few other updates around the NHL here. Talking about the return to the NHL by some of the players that were recently acquitted from the 2018 World Junior Trial. Chris Johnston and TSN Insider talking today about Alex Formenton. Now, we know Formenton's rights are technically still held by the Ottawa Senators, and the Sens and GM Steve Staios have made it pretty clear publicly that they're not going to re-sign him. That they discussed it, and they looked at it with and talked to the player's agent, that it would be best for all parties involved for him to get a fresh start. Now, so they said they would be open to trading his rights to another team that might be wanting to give him an opportunity. According to CJ, he doesn't think that Formenton's going to be making a return to the NHL this year. He doesn't think there's going to be enough interest. So we'll have to see where things go. So far, Formenton had signed and returned to the team he previously played with in Switzerland. And in 4 games, he's got no points and he's -4. So obviously, Formenton was away from the game for an extended time. He missed even probably more time, than some of these other guys. But it's hard, when you've been away from the game for an extended time to come back and, be in top form. So we'll see what happens. Obviously, slow start for him so far in Switzerland. And it seems like, according to CJ, that there's not much interest right now, and things would probably have to change a lot for another NHL team to decide to trade. Not only do you get the player, but, to actually give up something to get him as well. He might have to wait until his rights are expired and are no longer held by the Senators so that they can some team can sign him if they feel like he's given enough of a opportunity here to justify it. We'll have to wait and see. Now, another situation, of course, we're monitoring closely is Kirill Kaprizov in Minnesota. I know, according to Elliot Friedman's latest podcast that came out today, he says that it sounds like the Wild and Kaprizov's camp are going to be giving this another shot at getting him back to the table here. His agent, Paul Theophanis, has been seen in Minnesota, so the belief is that they're going to make another attempt at negotiating. I know some people thought after the rejection of the previous record-setting offer that it might be a situation where it's kind of hard to go back on. But it looks like they are going to try again. Kaprizov did make some comments, spoke to the media the other day as camp opened. Said that, he loves Minnesota, just wants to focus on playing hockey. So, part of that could be language barrier. Part of that's just that he, doesn't want to say too much more, which you understand. It's obviously, tough to comment during a tough negotiation like that. We don't really know the reasons. A lot of people are assuming that Kaprizov maybe doesn't want to be there. Is he trying to, make sure that they up the ante here a little bit with the rising cap? Is it a situation where he thinks he can even get even more money? We know Friedman's previous comments indicated that he thinks Kaprizov must be confident that another team out there would offer him, upwards of 19 or 20 million if he waits and touches free agency next year. So we'll have to see. Certainly a bunch of big names are in that predicament here, deciding what to do with the future. I know another player that they talked about on the 32 Thoughts podcast as well is Dallas Stars forward Jason Robertson, who's been, very much in the rumor mill for the past number of months since the Stars season ended. We know that there was a stretch of time when a lot of people thought Robertson might be on the trade block. There was a stretch of time where it was believed that they were having more contract extension talks and that they wanted to wait and see where that went before they could make it a firm decision. But Jim Nill, the GM of the Stars, had made comments saying that with the evolving marketplace and the rising salary cap, he says they're basically at a standstill with the Robertson negotiation here. We know that Jason Robertson and the Dallas Stars, I think there is mutual interest to work out an extension, but obviously bringing in Mikko Rantanen and that long-term deal, I think will play a role here on what they're willing to do as well. So it's difficult to say where things are at, but the fact that they're at a standstill, is not good. At the same time, there's a little bit less pressure with the Robertson situation than there are some of the other ones because he is still a restricted free agent at the expiration of his current contract. So they're not at risk for him to walk freely as a UFA here. So I still think they'll take their time and see what they can figure out. And if the money becomes too rich, it's still quite possible a trade does end up being the outcome there. But at least it's a scenario where the Stars can take their time a little bit more since it's not, high risk to lose them. Now, Mason McTavish, another scenario. According to Dave Pagnotta tonight, there is a major gap between the two sides. When the agent for McTavish, Pat Morris, basically told him he might as well head back to Ottawa and train there for the time being. It sounds like they're kind of dug in and prepared for a lengthy negotiation to continue as training camp and even the NHL regular season gets underway. So, according to Pagnotta, the gap is pretty sizable. We've heard before that the Ducks were preferring long-term on a deal and that McTavish might be hesitant there. Now, Pagnotta's information is very different from that. He's saying that Mason McTavish is actually quite willing to sign long-term, but the problem is that there's a major gap on money. McTavish right now to do a 7 or 8 year deal is going to want something close to the $8 million range. So probably I would assume like an 8x8 or at least something, in that range, right? If you think about where his projection is going and with the cap going up as much as it is, I can see why he might be looking for that. The Ducks are reportedly offering a 5-year deal around the $5.5 million range, according to Pagnotta. So, that's significant. Now, he said, 7 to 8 range for McTavish on the long term. So, that's why I kind of figured, they might be looking for an 8x8. But even if they're, you're looking at anywhere from $1.5 million to $2.5 million gap and a gap on term. So that's a significant gap on two very important pieces of the pie there to get a contract negotiation agreed to. So it sure sounds like that potential could be existing for a long, drawn-out battle in the sand here. Now, of course, as we know so far, and Pagnotta confirms this again tonight, that as of right now, that Verbeek and the Ducks are not wanting to trade McTavish, and McTavish has not officially requested a trade. Although he says that, frustration could eventually boil over here, and it could lead to that, It has not happened as of yet. Elliot Friedman on his podcast talking about McTavish did acknowledge that teams are definitely checking in on McTavish. They're definitely calling. And the longer this drags out, it's probably going to create more phone calls, more teams kind of checking in and trying to see if they can pry this guy loose out of the Anaheim Ducks organization. But they're not at that point just yet. But with a sizable gap, I suspect this could be one that really drags on, or at least it has that potential. Now, in Montreal as well, we've talked a lot about the offseason for who's going to be the number 2 center, especially after the Habs traded Carey Price. A lot of people thought if that contract got moved, that we would see a subsequent move for another young forward, most likely a center, coming in from another organization. Well, it has not happened here as of yet. The latest intel around that suggests that, based on comments from Marty St. Louis, that they are going to give Kirby Dach every opportunity to be that guy before they pull the trigger here. So going into this training camp, into the first part of the regular season, Dach is going to be basically slotted there. So they said going into camp, that's where they have him. Now, he didn't take part in the scrimmage. He has been on the ice, but I don't know that he's going to be, fully fledged competing in all aspects of everything in camp here just yet. There's still, as much as the team was saying that they were confident he would start the season on time for game 1, I think there's still a little bit of doubt by some that maybe that happens, although it doesn't mean that he wouldn't be too far behind if that is the case. But at this point, I think we can say that Dach will be given the opportunity first before we see a trade. So I would not think that a trade for a number 2 centerman is likely something we're going to see. If things don't work out with Dach, if he's struggling, I would suspect that we'll see the Habs maybe be a little bit more aggressive early in the season for a trade if it's not working out. But it's probably going to be kind of a wait-and-see pattern until then, because they might already have their guy. They still seem like they have a lot of confidence in Dach, even though he's been through a lot injury-wise, before they kind of turn the page and go to another player outside the organization. So we'll see now. Could Dach be included in a trade if that happens? It's possible. I mean, at that point, you have to think that if they're trying to bring in another player, it's because they don't have the confidence that Dach can be that guy and be productive. So it wouldn't be shocking if he was, dangled in a deal. But again, it's hard to say what another team would want in return, right? So we'll have to see where things go. But I would suspect right now, do not see a Habs trade for a centerman for at least a few weeks here as the rest of camp takes place in the early part of the season, probably into October, November sometime, before they decide to address it through another method. So let me know your thoughts on all today's news and rumors in the comments. We'll discuss further. If you're new to the channel, make sure you subscribe and stick around. We'll keep you up to date with all the news, rumors, and analysis of all 32 NHL teams. Thanks for watching. I'll catch you next time.